Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCG live codes, make sure you check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your orders using that code OmniPoke.
For today's video, we're going to be doing an NAIC tier list. This is going to be the first tournament with Destined Rivals legal, and by far the most important one that we can get playing with these new cards. So I'm going to talk about the decks, where I think they're positioned heading into this massive tournament, and also touch on their potential popularity going into the event. I'm going to be making a prediction for these decks of how popular they're going to be in a day one metagame percentage. I do quickly just want to give the highlights and the headlines of Destined Rivals then, and I'm going to use the week one data to sort of illustrate this, just for a quick thing to look at. This is a couple days old already, so there's going to be updates from this as we get closer to the tournament, but just as a very quick snapshot, Grimmsnarl is the new deck of Destined Rivals on the block, and it is the real deal. It's very popular online, yes, in fact the most popular, somewhat because it's a powerful deck, but somewhat because it's just the new toy that people want to test with, but it's also got the results to sort of back it up, right? It's the best standalone performing deck. You have to combine all the Dragapults to slightly increase it in S tier, but it's already like dwarfing Gardevoir's results, for example, which was the previous best performer in Journey Together, and incidentally has a weak time into the Grimmsnarl. So I think that tug of war, that rock, paper, scissors almost, of Gardevoir being good into Dragapult but fearing the Grimmsnarl, and Grimmsnarl being solid into the Gardevoir, also fairly solid into Dragapult, but I think Dragadusk is like mildly favoured into this matchup. So I do think there's a bit of RPS going on between these three stage 2s, although Grimmsnarl generally is like okay into both. So that's something to bear in mind, that these are sort of tug of warring against each other, and if you pick any of these stage 2s, you have to be slightly concerned when you face, the opposing one that you don't want to run into. So that's a small thing to bear in mind. I don't want to get too bogged down in the numbers here. Just a few things to note. I think Flareon is really like underplayed and underperforming. It's the 12th most played, despite being like frequently in the top 10 most played in the Journey Together format and having some decent results behind it. Terabox is nowhere to be seen, not in terms of play rates or just like point earnings. I understand why it's fallen off the map, because there are new cards coming out. The Shaman and the Watchtower are the two sort of big tech cards that we have to debate in the Destined Rivals format, and I'll be talking about those cards and mentioning them as we go through all the decks. But I did just want to give a quick rundown, basically to say that a lot of people have been playing this Grimmsnarl. A lot of people played Typhlosion as well, the 4th most popular, so it shows that it's like just fairly average. But we'll get into the decks specifically as we go. Let's get into it then. I'm going to go in order from how these decks performed in a Journey Together format, and then we'll talk about all the new stuff at the end, if that makes sense. So Gardevoir is going to be no longer, I think, the best deck in format. I think it was pretty unchecked looking back at Journey Together. It felt like the next 2 or 3 best decks all had rough times into Gardevoir, so then like it was only really the bottom echelon of decks that had an okay time into Gardy, but then struggled with the other wave of popular decks. So I think Gardevoir has much more of a challenge in this format, in that Grimmsnarl exists, which is a awkward matchup. There's also more reason for Dragazard to be a choice for the Dragapult players, which is much more dangerous than a straight Dragapult for Gardevoir. And also there's the small headache of Shaman being in decks, and very often Gardevoir's got away with playing no boss's orders, just a couple counter catchers, sometimes only one, and saying that Screamtail is busted, and often initiating a prize race into these decks with that early game Screamtail, even if it's just for like an 80 damage hit on a basic or a stage 1 or something. Taking those easy knockouts is very much the bread and butter of Screamtail, and that's consequently what Gardevoir often tried to do to sort of tee things up and get started in the game. And I think that is much more checked now by Shaman coming into the format. I think most importantly, because Gardevoir itself actually plays Artisan for these players, that they can get a freebie Shaman down during the game, and that gets even more complicated for the Gardevoir. As for Gardevoir builds, I like Secret Box still in the deck. I like that TM Evolution still being in the deck, even without Rabsca, because I imagine you're cutting down to Shaman. But I do think a Watchtower in Gardy is very reasonable. I think it's very good into Flareon, very good into Charizard Pidgeot, very good into... what am I thinking of? Raging Bolt, of course. So yeah, and Terabox as well. So I think Watchtower's a cracked card, and any deck that can play Secret Box should be playing Watchtower, in my opinion, because it's such a win con in one card. So I think that's one adaptation I would like to make with Gardevoir, but I think generally you can still go Brent direction, you can still go Henry direction, but I think there's a debate to be had now about whether or not Boss has to come back into the deck list, because Screamtail has nullified that little bit more in the format, and that can make your prize map a little hazier. So I do think there are things from this new expansion that generally hurt this archetype. Not so much that it's not going to be really, really strong and still played by a lot of great players, but I do think it's slightly hindered. Speaking of which, we then have Straight Dragapult, which is the second best performer in Journey Together. I'm actually dropping this down to B tier, because not only is the Gardevoir matchup still bad, but I also think the Grimmsnarl matchup is bad as well, because I don't think you have that stopping power that you need with these other Stage 2s of Dusknoir or Charizard to get through a Grimmsnarl. They simply have more monkeys than you, which means they're going to be completely dominating that matchup in terms of where they place the counters, and they get way ahead. So when a straight Dragapult is weak into the other two Stage 2s that I'm going to put high tier, I think it's a hard sell, to be honest with you. However, I think Dragapult Dusknoir is well poised. I'm putting this as the S tier deck of the format, the only one, I think, right now, in that it can combat both of the Stage 2s. Yes, it doesn't love Gardevoir, but it at least can try and fight that fight. And I do think that with Monkey Dory still in the Dusknoir builds, trying to hybrid that little bit and have the Luminous Energy package, I think you're still like solid enough into both of these decks. You have a lot of damage output at your disposal, and that's really necessary, I think, for battling these other Stage 2s. So I do think that this is the way to go. You even out your matchups, you're greedy, but I do think it has the power level to be the standalone best deck in the game, personally. And I think especially now that we are hybriding, you're not even weak into straight Dragapult if that's still popping up. And you appreciate that finally there's a check to Gardevoir in the format. There were reasons, well, I don't even know why, but for some reason Gardevoir wasn't around that sort of like 18% that it possibly could have been, because it was the best deck in the game. But now going into the NAIC, I would be surprised if Gardevoir gets above like 12 or 13%. I feel like that's the top end of this archetype, because there's such an obvious target on its back, with Grimmsnarl being an easy choice for players coming into the room. So I think the fact that you're almost shielded by the Grimmsnarls, that you see less Gardevoir in the field, which is just good for Dusknoir. Next up we have Raging Bolt Ogerpon. I'm going to put this also in B tier. This also gets simply just hurt by the tech cards. Raging Bolt doesn't appreciate seeing Watchtower, of course, and it also doesn't appreciate Shaman to an extent as well. Typically, these setup decks have to prioritize other basics, so oftentimes you can lead out with a Baby Bolt and it's still going to be good enough, but there will just be those handful of situations where they've Ionoed and researched and just randomly hit the Shaman, and your turn one was like dittoing into Baby Bolts, turn attaching to Baby Bolt, and now you're like, ugh, now I have to like waste Prime Catcher or do something else to have any meaningful turn, or I'm suddenly just knocking out the Budgie still, you know? And that's something you don't want to do. Part of the reason why Raging Bolt was so good, and Baby Bolt specifically was so good, was because you're denying the draw or the energy attachment or something this, that, and the other by just ignoring the little basic guy that they had in the active, and that's sort of taken away from you a little bit. And again, I'm admittedly a big believer in Watchtower. I do think it will show up to this tournament, so you can't just write it off. But I don't think Bolt necessarily wants to fit in a Chen Power, for example. I think it stays at its 3 stadium count and says that maybe it can still draw enough cards under Sada and Teal Dance that can still find those outs. But there will be those situations where you do just get caught stone dead by the Watchtower, even if it is late game, denying those outs for you to close. So I think it's only a B tier deck, mostly the Shaman actually, but the Watchtower also somewhat of a concern. So I'm dropping it from A tier to B tier. I also don't love it into, Charizard Dragapult is like more difficult, I think, than the straight Dragapult as well, just because Zard can also just be like a checkmate card in that matchup as well. If they're the ones in control of like countercatcher, if you've just taken one prize with a Baby Bolt, they're just instantly countercatching, taking their first 2, and they won't stop taking 2 from there, by virtue of the Charizard or even Chi-Yu as well, which is a basic they can use. Next up we have Joltic Box. I think Joltic Box is also a B tier archetype. It's an interesting basic attacking deck in that it's not affected by the Shaman or the Watchtower that Raging Bolt is, so it still has to be in that conversation, still has to be in that mix. The issue is I feel like you're not that favoured into a lot of these decks anyway. I know that you can be reasonable into Grimmsnarl just by virtue of having those Gravity Mountains at your disposal, by having potentially Picnic Basket, and also by potentially having the Iron Leaves EX in your deck as well. I do recommend the Iron Leaves not just for the easy KO on Grimmsnarl, but also to help you get around Maractus, which could be showing up in Grimmsnarl and in other decks. So I do think having some pivot cards in Joltik is worthwhile, but I think it's like fine, but I still don't love it into Dragadusk, and it's still weak to Raging Bolt, which I still think will be popular, even though I don't think it's a great play for the tournament. So yeah, I think the deck is like still just fine, still does what it does, but still has some like awkward matchups out in the field. The next best performer was Terabox in our previous format. Is it in here? Do I need to find it? Yeah, I need to even add it to my thing. Was Terabox, and yes, it's been really dropping in popularity online, and for good reason, honestly. I'm going to drop Terabox from what probably would have been like a B tier deck down to a C, because this is really hindered by the Watchtower, even more so than Raging Bolts, because you don't have any inherent draw. You just use Crispin, and then you just rely on like pure Noctowl, and then like the random card you see here and there from Mew, and the one time you get to use Flip the Script. So you really are dead in the water to Watchtower sometimes. I don't think you really want to play Chien-Pao in the deck either. The baby Chien-Pao is the one I'm talking about here to sort of counter stadiums and give yourself as many outs as possible. You know, the 4 Ultra Ball, and then you can have Chien-Pao. I think that's a little bit awkward, and also there's Shaman again. So this gets hurt even more so than Raging Bolt. So I think if you're going to play an Owl basic deck, it's probably going to be the Bolt over the Terabox. So maybe even D tier, honestly. It's hard because the power level's still there and the type coverage, but when you don't have that aggressive opener, it's so hard to justify. Maybe because, yeah, I'm actually going to put it in D tier, because I think if you can't go aggressive with Wellspring, you're better off playing Flareon, but we'll get there in a moment. Then we have Gholdengo Dragapult, which is doing really well online, actually. Can I see it here somewhere? Here it is. I'm going to put this towards the bottom of the A tier. It's an interesting archetype, and that I do think it's solid into the non-Duskpult, like just the other Dragapult builds. And I think it's pretty solid into Grimmsnarl as well. You can play Professor Turo, you play your own monkey, and you can offset a bunch of damage whilst just announcing 1-hit KO after 1-hit KO quite easily. And 260 is like a relatively high threshold early on as well for you. So I think that's quite powerful. And the Dragapult just gives you a bit more coverage into other stuff. It means you don't have to worry about annoying like Walling Mons and stuff. So yeah, I think the Dragapult is decent in this format, and it imposes its strategy quite consistently and quite well. Flareon, I'm begrudgingly still putting this in A tier. I know I've just dropped Bolt and Terabox down a couple tiers because I'm fearing Watchtower, and I think Flareon's big issue is the same card, but I think that there's still big upside to Flareon in that you can have Leafeon EX, which is really good into Grimmsnarl, not only because it KOs, but also because it heals 100 from each of your men, and that's really good into Dragapult as well. So much so that I think you can get away with just playing one Sylveon for the Angelite option in the deck, but not necessarily having to have it. Or you can cut it all together and just play Clefairy, or you can cut Clefairy as well and go heavy Leafeon, I should say, and just rely on healing against the Pult matchups and saying that just announcing 230 a turn and wiping off all the damage every single turn is good enough, because you essentially turn Phantom Dive into a useless attack by just having a spam heal option. That's a bit of a slower, grindier matchup, which might play into Dragapult's hands. So I don't think that's guaranteed, and I think a lot of people will still bring the Clefairy as the training wheels build, essentially. But I do think you need to pick your battles, because I think it's still important to have a Gardevoir answer, so I probably would still be playing Umbreon. But I think Umbreon, Leafeon, Flareon are the 3 most important, and Sylveon is now less important, even though it's cool and stylish and lets you have comebacks into all sorts of dodgy situations. So I like the positioning of this deck. It's purely a fear of Watchtower that is holding me back from the archetype. And I think I've said that Bolt and Terabox shouldn't play more stadiums or Chien-Pao. I think Flareon is the deck that should. We've seen that already. I think Cal Connor played it online, and he played a list with that baby Chien-Pao, and I think it's worth it. I would probably cut the Terra Orb and go to 4 Ultra Ball and have the Chien-Pao in the deck, just to give yourself the 3 physical stadiums plus the 4 balls and Pao to get you into the game. And if you're going for Ultra Ball, I would then swap Brock to Cyrano, so I can still find my EVs really easily and quickly. Just a small note, I definitely value this deck, and if I wasn't so high on Watchtower myself, I would probably be looking to play this deck at the tournaments, because I want to be the one imposing Watchtower on other people, and I think the card is crazy, crazy strong, so I want to be experimenting with it personally. But yeah, I think Flareon, there's going to be people that do really well with the archetype, because I think its type coverages are still so strong and getting more appealing, actually, going into the format. Drapagos Noctowl was the 9th best performer. We're not talking about it too much because I don't think it's going to continue to be that great. Zoroark, I'm also going to shove into the D tier. It's a rough one, but Darmanitan is the selling point of this archetype, just plain and simple. And even though there's like some Gholdengo coming back, I don't think the like fear of Darmanitan is going to change that too much. So yeah, I don't think there's going to be enough Gholdengo that makes us still want to have this card just for backdraft. It's still all about Flame Body Cannon, and that gets wrecked by us, honestly. So yeah, unfortunately, and Zoroark. I feel like Zoroark itself is still a really good card and can feature in other stuff, but not like this. Then there was the other Gholdengo variants, but I do think the Pult was the best performer. Then there was Arch Poison, so I'll take the chance to talk about Arch Bomb, I suppose, even though this is a new archetype, really. I'm actually going to put this... I think this is like one of my boldest calls. I'm going to put this bottom of A tier. I think this is really, really underplayed right now. It's not a thrill-seeking deck at all. It doesn't play a draw engine outside of Pheasantipity, but just the dumb bully stats of Archaludon with Monkey Dories and Venture Bombs are really, really good. I even played Max Belt in my recent video, and it pushes Archaludon into silly numbers. You have Raging Hammer, you have Turo as well, which is backbreaking for, again, Dragapult builds. Even Dusknoir builds don't appreciate it too much. Grimmsnarl hates seeing a Turo. I feel like your only bad matchup, only is a bit much, but one of your worst fears is Gardevoir, and that's a matchup where you need your monkeys to be popping off and you need your bombs to be flipping correctly, especially into like a Drifloon that's committed and stuff. So I think that's still one of your weaker matchups, Guardy, but I think the fact that that's going from 15% maybe down to like the 12-13%, that's good for you. So that maybe you only hit like 1 in day 1 and like 1 in day 2, and you can still have a really deep run with the archetype. I think this is like horrendously underplayed for how simplistic and good it is. It has the same simplicity as like a Joltic Box, I would say. Maybe a bit more complex because it's doing some monkey math. But in terms of like, I'm just ripping research, I'm just playing boss's orders, I'm playing Poker Gear for the right supporter every turn. If I can make that decision correctly, I'm going to have a good time with Arch. So I do respect this deck quite a lot, and I think it's horrendously underplayed for its positioning in the format, to be honest with you. Again, this did really well in City Leagues in Japan in this format, just because it didn't do well in the Champions League, and by do well, I mean it didn't make the top 16 exactly out of a 5,000 player tournament, so people aren't respecting it enough, and I think that could surprise some people. You balance out your Bolt and Joltik so much just by having Venture Bomb in the deck, and then your like tanky selling points into the other stage 2s are still like definitely felt and known. So I think this is a really good deck. Then we do have the Dragazard. I'm going to put this in A tier as well. It's going to be quite a big A tier actually, I think. He says, I may not be adding many things in it afterwards. But I do think it's slightly worse than Dusknoir, but not by much, if that makes sense. I think, again, you get to abuse Watchtower, which I'm beating a drum here, that I think that card is crazy. But I do think that it's only really Dragadusk that is that bad for you, and even then, the matchup can still just be about you setting the tempo and getting ahead. I do think it's probably worth playing Buju in the build, even though it loves playing TM Evo so often, and enjoys playing Cleffer. I think a Buju just for when you face the Dusknoir builds is worthwhile, so they don't just like punt you off the board with Candy Dusk, Night Stretcher, Dusk, Clops, you know, like that sort of stuff. That's the only thing that holds me back. Maybe I have to put it a little bit lower, actually. Maybe I'll put it below the Flareon, because I do think you're worried about Dusk, but I think you're balanced into Guardy. I think you're like okay into Grim as well. So I think the deck is pretty fine. I've been standing it for a while. Roaring Moon, a deck that just won a special championships. I'm going to put this into B tier. One of its selling points had to have been Gardevoir, but also I might even put it above Joltic Box just out of personal preference. But I do think generally Poison Package can dunk on a lot of these stage 2s just because their engines are not great, and just continuing to announce pass with Poison is pretty good, and you build towards big frenzied gouges, etc. Yeah, I think, again, it's similar to the Archaludon where it just imposes its own strategy. Everything is going second against, like, everyone in the format is opting second unless they're a Noctowl deck, which gives you the license to have the high rolls of donking, or even if you're not winning on the spot, you're initiating that prize race so early and not giving the opponent time to flip the script either. So, yeah, I think the card is still good. What else do we have? We then have 19th best performer in Journey Together was Charizard Pidgeot. I'll once again take the chance to say, why is this good again? I don't get it. I'm always bullying Charizard Pidgeot. I feel like I've been doing tier lists for a long time saying it's like outstayed its welcome in the meta. And I think surely with Grimmsnarl in format, there's only more reason to not like this approach. This deck still gets Budew bullied by the Grim, the Draga Dusk that's, even more aggressive. Gardevoir can play Budew and might have to put it back in as well in the format just to, help balance the Dustoir. So that has to be bad news for Charizard Pidgeot. It really has to be. I think if you're playing Charizard Pidgeot, you're doing it just because you still love the deck too much to put it down, or you're just expecting lots of the Dengos, Bolts, and Joltic boxes that just announce 2 prize, 2 prize, 2 prize at you, and you can force that Dustoir Briar combo and laugh in their face. I think that means we only have new stuff. Well, I guess technically we do have Toedscruel. I will put Toedscruel in bottom of B. I think its consistency is there. I just don't know if its power level is there. But if you think that Grimmsnarl is going to be above 15%, you can have some free wins. And let me tell you, those are free wins. It's very difficult for Toedscruel to brick just because it plays all the setup basic EXs. It plays really high ball search, really high energy count for teal dances. It's hard to brick with the deck, which means you just get into the game against Grimmsnarl and impose your strategy. So it's really hard to lose that matchup. And it's also really annoying for the Dengos. It's really annoying for Dragapult as well. So there's actually some freebies you take with Toedscruel. It's just that you're really underdog into some of the other stuff. I think you're pretty behind against the Joltic, the Flareon, the Raging Bolt. Really, really behind. So this is the one where you just say, let matchups take the wheel and hope for the best, really. And I think that just means, well, we have walls as well. I'm just going to stick walls in D. Because we're talking about so many decks in the format, I might even put it at the bottom of D, to be honest. When the format's this wide, it's really hard to pick a walls deck because you're just going to be in the blender of matchups. So, yeah. I'm then going to talk about Grimmsnarl. I think this is above Gardevoir in A tier. I think this is the second best deck in the game right now, in that it's got a way to fight into Dragapult, all the builds. It's good into Gardevoir, and there's not much that I fear from this top tier of decks, to be honest. Flareon's a bit of a sketchy one. Again, Secret Box is already the A-spec go-to for Grimmsnarl. I'm obviously trying to force a Watchtower into the deck, and I think scamming a Flareon deck early game is really good for Grimmsnarl. You can bully them off the board once again, take the only terror out of play, and suddenly you're really just cruising past them. So I gotta say, Box is a crazy A-spec for this tournament just because I think Watchtower is crazy. I think of the top tier stuff, what do I even fear? I fear a random Toedscruel that's going to be a 0% of the room. I fear Joltic Box playing Iron Leaves. Raging Bolt's not the easiest matchup. You can still get past it. If you want to play Maractus, you can. Yeah, I think Grimmsnarl's really good. I'm tempted to put it S, but just the fact that it doesn't have that draw engine that Dragapult can lean into to be consistent every single game that it plays, I have to put it in just A tier. But the top of A tier, I think that's pretty clear. Ethan's Typhlosion I'm going to put in C tier. I know it's had some decent online results. It has been inflated by just how much has been played, though. So bear that in mind. I just don't think it's the right time to play a Beatstick one prize deck because there's Dragadusk, because there's Grimmsnarl, because there's Guardy to an extent with its monkeys as well. All these other Draga builds. I just feel like it's such a bad time to try and set up multiple basics and stage 1s and slowly evolve into your stage 2s when they're so squishy. It's okay when you get your EXs online because they're the ones that sponge a hit into all these other matchups. But when you're doing it with a Typhlosion that's going down every turn and then so's the Cyndaquil and then you need to put 2 more Cyndaquils in play, but you're staring down these sorts of stage 2s, it just gets horrendous. So, yeah, I think Ethan's Typhlosion's pretty poor. Rocket's Meteor I'm going to put in C tier. I feel like its weaknesses are obvious in that you can just lose the game on the spot if you get Ionode into not random receiver and you need, the Rocket's receiver, and you just don't have the right supporter that you need on the turn. It's so easy for the deck to fall behind. Its type coverage is good in terms of Spidops into Grim. And you have, obviously, Bravery Charm Articuno, which is really annoying for the Dragapult builds. So into the 2 best decks, it can fight. I just think it's bad into the other stuff, honestly. And not that consistent either. I'm still littering the C tier. Garchomp is either C or D, honestly. D, I feel like I've just done the stuff that was good, but it's even worse position than ever. So I don't think Garchomp is that mold. I think it's like just worse than the other stage 2s by quite a significant margin. You can get your stage 2s online really easily with Gabite. You get high damage output with Roserade, but it's like you have a big turn, you discard all your energy, and then you're like, I'm back to 160 damage or something along those lines. And then you're like, oh, I really hope my Spiritomb triggers, otherwise I have a bad turn ahead of me. So if your opponent's aware of what the Garchomp is trying to do, I don't think it's all that powerful. And I think all the other decks are just like cuter with the math. Garchomp is like Ice Smash Face, and there's better Ice Smash Face decks, I think, in the format, to be honest with you. Then Yanmega. I think Yanmega is similar to Toedscruel. I'm going to put it in B. I think it has a bit of potential, honestly. The type, again, like, the caveat is we're hoping that there's enough Grimmsnarl that the type coverage is a big boast, a big benefit, so you have some free matchups by just boosting into the Grimmsnarls and pounding through them with such high hit points. That's terrifying for Grimmsnarl. But also the fact that you can be attaching to some big threats in the back is reasonable. I've not played enough with this deck just yet to really give my full fleshed out opinions, but I like the logic of it. It's at least like a decent pace setting stage 1 that hits 210, which is a really good number, right? That's getting you around any basic sitting EX like Lati, Fez, Mew. That's getting around all of those. Teal Mask as well. So you hit such a nice number so easily with Yanmega, and you're just like leaning into those bosses, those prime catchers as much as you can. And then you have Iron Hands hopefully lined up as well, because it's the classic situation of if the opponent doesn't deal with your Yanmega, you at least have it online again for the following turn. The only time I think that's quite bad is to like into Dragadusk and Dragazard, because if they do just handle the hands, Yanmega at some point doing 210 is just like not good enough, you know? That's the only thing that I have the caveat of. It feels like a little too honest. I think I still prefer Arch Bomb to Yanmega, but I do need to play more with the Yanmega as well. And that leaves Blaziken EX. This is another deck that I've done a video on, and this is actually my wild card pick for being a pretty good deck in this format. And by pretty good, I actually mean really good. I think this is a bottom of A tier deck that's still yet to be figured out. I'm still playing a lot of games with Blaziken Zoro, similar to what I've played in my video the other day, but I have changed my A spec. I've changed from Trolley to playing Secret Box, and Secret Box is a crazy card. If it hasn't been obvious, I've been preaching Secret Box all video because Box gives you Watchtower, which can sometimes scam games. And scamming Flareon, scamming Bolt, that's already just like so much value, I think, for me. And Secret Box generally for this deck just opens up the TM Evo quite easily, because you can also play Artisan. So you can do the classic, I'll get Artisan plus Poffin plus Evo plus Supporter for next turn from my first Arven. That gets me into game, and that just gets you setting up. The selling point that I've been saying to my friends about Blaziken, because people still don't believe me, they think I'm just completely trolling with this card. But I'm still testing it, and like for real, like I've got them ready to go to the tournament. Here's my pitch, okay? So I talked about the rock paper scissors of our other stage 2 decks, and Blaziken has a water weakness, and I don't see anything that's wet on this entire page. So Blaziken's low-key the stage 2 that tanks better than most of these other stage 2s just because it has no weakness. I know Dragapult doesn't have a weakness, but it does because of Clefairy, right? So Blaziken actually stands tall into all of the stage 2s, whereas some of them just have like woeful matchups, rock, paper, scissoring each other. And then Zoroark is a good draw engine, has dark type coverage for the Guardi, and is another Pokemon that these decks don't want to attack into. Dragapult and Grimmsnarl do not want to attack into a Zoroark. So if you're even on prizes against them, they really struggle to find their boss because they're so counter-catch heavy that you can put your opponent in a spot where they have to punch a Zoro, and that just feels terrible because then you're getting your powerful Rage off and getting that one-hit KO turn. So I low-key still really like Blaziken. I'm genuinely considering it for the tournament. I've been playing it for like 3 or 4 days and still ladder climbing and Arceus with it. So I think, built correctly, this could be a really strong deck, to be honest with you. For my full transparency right now, it's Archaludon and Blaziken that I'm testing the most for the tournaments. I've put a lot of reps in already with Dragazard. I played that in Portland, so I already know how that deck operates, and I think it's good. I do think these are still the best decks for the format row. So there we go. And I also just quickly want to go over my expected percentages for all of these decks. So let's rattle through this. I think combining Dragapult is going to be around 15+%. Actually, is it going to be more than 15? Hold on. I've got 9% for Dragadusk. I've got 6% for Dragazard. And I still think there will be a contingent playing Straight Pult. So yeah, I've got a combined 15%. Oh, sorry, a combined 21% is right there for me. So that's a lot of Draga. My argument for that is, I think with the potential for less Gardevoir in the room, it's even safer for Pult. And Pult has been around 18%, knowing full well that it's had a terrible Gardevoir, and that was the best deck in the format. Does that make sense? That's why I'm going for that. I'm still sticking at 13% for Gardevoir, and I'm going 13% for Grimmsnarl as well. I think a lot of Dragapult players are very happy to swing their matchup from bad to good into Gardevoir and get their one over on them. I think Grimmsnarl is not the most intuitive deck, but intuitive enough to take. It's very mathsy, it's very slow with Frostlass, and people really have to be quick at doing their Freezing Shroud damage throughout the entire tournament, but I do think this is a well-positioned, strong deck. And 13% Gardevoir, like I said throughout the video, that's my high end. That's me saying people are still shrugging and saying this was the best deck, why think more about it? And you gain space by cutting Rabska, you get to cut one of your 3 TM Evos as well. So you're gaining 2 spaces in Gardevoir is pretty valuable, honestly, for a bit of extra consistency. Or maybe some tech, like maybe adding in an extra candy, maybe adding in the Watchtower that I really like. Stuff like that are things that I'm considering in Gardevoir by cutting the Rabska. Then we have Dragapult. I do think this one's going to be popular. I'm going to put this at around the 6%. Because it has been doing well online, and its data looks good online just because there are some strong players piloting it. I'm going to say the 5% for Flareon. I think that's elevated from where it's been in previous tournaments, but I think the Leafeon EX is a really intriguing option, very good into Grimmsnarl, and I also think good into a lot of these Dragapult builds as well. So I think the only thing holding back Flareon popularity is that Watchtower fear. Archaludon, I've got like 2%. I don't think a lot of people are going to take it. I don't think anyone's taking Blaziken unless they really, really trust me. But I don't think they necessarily should. Raging Bolt, I've got at the 11%, just because it's still aggressive, big basic. Moon did just win a tournament, so I'm going to throw 2% at that. 5% for Joltic Box. I think it's more easy to justify Bolt, even though it's got some weaknesses going into this next tournament. I don't think there's be like anyone trusting Yanmega or Toedscruel. I'll give 1% to Toedscruel just because the blueprint's there from Ray. I'm going to say 2% for Rocket because people think it's cool and fun and Rocket. 2% for Charizard because people won't give up on it. 1 for Typhlosion just because that's been really popular online, so people have really wanted to try that. I don't think anyone really is going to be playing this. Not enough to make a percentage at least. So that's 84% of the field is my prediction right now, with Grimmsnarl, Gardevoir combined to be, or like more or less level. Honestly, Grimmsnarl might be the most popular individual deck, but I do have that big chunk of Dragapult as well, where I think it gets 21% of the field. I don't know where I was getting 15% from. I was just doing the one of them. Maybe I'm overinflated on Pult, but I keep thinking back to like just how much people wanted to play Pult, even though it was glaringly obvious that Gardevoir was winning every tournament. You know what I mean? So I think people will enjoy the fact that Grimmsnarl is existing and challenging Gardevoir, and then relying on good old reliable, which is Dragadusk. You know, I think that's quite likely. In terms of plays for the tournaments, I think Flareon again. If you don't fear, I've been trying to fearmonger Watchtower, actually not even fearmonger because I'm going to be the one playing it. So I'm warning you that good players will want to play Watchtower to the tournament because free wins are just good. And I've been catching a lot of these decks with their pants down online just by randomly scamming them with one Watchtower in the deck. Whether it's a turn 1 Secret Box play or an Iono Watchtower late game play, both of these can devastate the Flareons and the Raging Bolts. And the Flareon is hit much harder than Bolt once again because they play no draw engine, right? They have like 1 Cyrano and 2 Iono. Otherwise, it's just Crispin. Whereas Raging Bolt at least plays 4 Sada and Teal Mask, so they can draw a few cards to hit their outs. Flareon just sits there twiddling its thumbs if it doesn't have access to Owl. So that's my only fear factor. Now, I'm probably the most bullish on Watchtower that you've heard from anyone so far, but I think that's the only thing holding Flareon back from being like a really, really good play to this tournament. and Blaziken. I don't know. Maybe I've gone goofy with my pet deck. You can definitely call me an idiot about this one, but I'm putting my money where my mouth is in terms of like what I've been testing, what I've been seeing with the deck, and how much I've been enjoying it. Archaludon is more about like the pedigree from Japan and me playing the list and seeing the logic around the list and it just being like fine. I don't think there's any matchup that Archaludon now goes into and it's like yikes. Again, my video played Watchtowers, so maybe that's a reason why. Any deck that can fit in Watchtower, I'm loving. But you could also cut Watchtowers and play Jamming Towers and have a better time into Gardevoir again by having Monkey, Bomb, Jamming all into Gardevoir. That's a lot of tech for Gardevoir. And then just saying that you're big and dumb into all these other matchups and that Turo is really good into these setup damage decks. Yeah, that's my thoughts. Let me know what you thought down below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow for another one. Cheers.